Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Magic Duels. This week we are doing a kind of artifact control. I think the best iteration I heard of it is basically it's similar to lantern control in how it plays. So slow, painful, and annoying, and decisions, that kind of thing. So let's get into it, and I'll yeah, by the way, when I say a lot of decisions, I can only play this in certain spurts of time before I have to go play something else or take a break. So that said, I originally got the deck idea from the professor's video about the kind of Atog, the new gremlin. Let's just bring him up for a moment. Creature, red, and page 2 for 2 mana. Where are you? Show yourself! How many? Oh, there he is. So, the deck was originally based on Ravenous Intruder. Basically the Atog deck in a nutshell. And it was the intent to get him out. But obviously you see that he's not in there at current time because the deck was way too volatile for him. Too prone to removal, basically. So went with a different route and decided to make a decision tree for myself and my opponents combined. So, first card in the deck is Walking Ballista for XX is a 0/0, and when he enters the battlefield, put X +1/+1 counters on him. And you can pay 4 to put a counter on him, or you can remove a counter on him to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Guess how we deal damage? Yep, 1 point at a time. So, yeah, this guy comes in and he's very easily removable. Like, what I mean to say is a lot of people focus their hate on it, but we can sack it for the damage anyway, and then their focus is pointless most of the time. I mean, we can only put counters on it very slowly. So he's a gigantic lightning rod. See, made of metal. He's a very fancy lightning rod. But anyways, he gets his way, and he always pulls a removal card out of the opponent's hand. Very nice for that regard. Also, artifact to keep in mind. Next up, Bomat Courier for 1 mana, and is a 1/1 haste. When it attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. And you can pay a red, discard your hand, sacrifice Courier, and put all exiled cards all the exiled cards into the owner's hands, which is basically us. And I suppose if they take a control magic spell, they probably have that weird situation like that. But yeah, he's just a quick 1-drop, and he offers card advantage in his own way. And also mana costs are kind of a little bit relevant in regards. So having sacrificable artifacts is a thing for this deck. You see quite a few of them. Page 1 is all sacrifice effects. That is a thing because we have Pia's Revolution in the deck, so there will be some recursion going on depending on how allergic our opponent is to damage, basically. Next card is Implement of Combustion for 1 mana, and you can pay 1, sacrifice to deal 1 damage to target player. Can be a Planeswalker, which is one of the decks that we do okay against because of the fact that we can take down Planeswalkers directly. And when it's put in the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Not necessarily through our sacrifice outlet. We can do that at any time that it gets to the graveyard. So yeah, that's it's all just really cheap stuff that was kind of irrelevant. Like I said, it was based around Ravenous Intruder, so the card draw based on that was the synergy to try and keep pumping him up, basically try to get him in for the lethal damage swing. Still relevant in the deck, very cheap card. You can get rid of it to draw a card, and Revolution can bring it back potentially. Next card up is Renegade Map for 1 mana. Enters the battlefield tapped. Sacrifice the map. Search your library for a basic land card. Reveal it and put it in your hand. Then shuffle your library. So that's our way of hopefully ramping up very slowly. Not necessarily ramp, just get all the lands out of our deck with a Revolution if, like again, the opponent is allergic to damage. I've seen a lot of people opt not to give us this, and it's like, I'm not sure if this is the one you should be doing that to, because eventually that damage is going to pile up. Okay, so next up is Lightning Axe. For 1 mana, an additional cost, you discard a card or pay 5. It deals 5 damage to the target creature. This is our Hail Mary for the early game. That's the only reason it's in here for 2 copies, simply because there's a lot of cards we may need in our hand, and there's no real benefit to us discarding. There's like 1 card that has remote benefit to it. So it's very rare that we actually want to discard something. It does come up, but for the most part, we want to just sit with 2 for the emergency, like I said, Hail Marys and whatnot going on. Next up is Key to the City, kind of one of the key cards to the deck. That was not intended, it just kind of rolled off. And for 2 mana is an artifact, and you can tap and discard a card, and up to 1 target creature cannot be blocked this turn. That's not really relevant part. It's the second ability. Whenever a Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 mana, and if you do, draw a card. So we have Ghirapur Aether Grid in here, which will end up allowing us to tap the key without having to discard the card. So we can pay 2 mana to draw an extra card each turn, potentially. So pretty good that way for some more card advantages. You can see most of the cards cycle or replace themselves in some regards. Card drawing is not really a big issue with this deck. I mean, it's pretty freaking simple, actually. Next up is Servo Schematic. This is just kind of early blocker, mostly the reason why. So for 2 mana, it's an artifact. When it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless Servo artifact creature token. So for the grid, it creates 2 tokens or 2 artifacts, which is relevant, or provides you an early blocker should the opponent get out of control before you can get in control. So just whatever buys you that extra turn, you're going to take a lot of damage early game, but if you can prevent it at key times, then it's probably pretty good. So the 1/1 creature definitely helpful in that regards, and gets some artifacts onto the field, which is more what we're after. Next up is Alchemist Vial. For 2 mana and enters the battlefield, draw a card. You can pay 1 and sacrifice Alchemist Vial. Target creature can't attack or block this turn. So it, like again with Key to the City, we've got 2 options, but it's mostly we just want to prevent enemies from attacking each turn. And with PS Revolution, that can be a thing that could come up. Where they just recycle it. Depends on how low you get their life totals. A lot of times they'll take the 3 damage, but again, that's an option to take 3 damage. So a target creature can't attack this turn. You take the damage instead. How about that? So it is a possibility. I mean, you just got to read the card when things like this are out. But if they're allergic to damage, you get to constantly draw cards and keep their monsters at bay. So there's that. Monsters? Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. Next up is Scrap Trawler. For 3 mana is a 3/2 artifact creature, and when it or another artifact you control is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact card in your graveyard with lesser converted mana cost. This thing is insane with PS Revolution, which I'll get to soon if you're not 100% sure based on what I've implied. So it can, you sack a vial. Vial brings back a map or an implement or a courier or a walking ballista. I mean, there's lots of options. Trawler will bring back everything 2 or less. And while it's in the field, it's any artifact. So yeah, you can sacrifice all kinds of things for all kinds of advantage. And there is options to get there. If Trawler's out on the field, there are options and ways you can set it up to really go the distance for that kind of strategy. Sacrifice strategy could be pretty good. Even without PS Revolution, it's entirely possible to run that whole thing. Also, he's a 3/2 body, if that even matters, which sometimes does. I mean, you might need to block, and it'll return something more relevant, maybe. Anyways, next card up is Filigree Familiar. For 3 mana is a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. And when it dies, you draw a card. So that's just meant to try and balance out the life total, and again, it replaces itself, and under Trawler, it again replaces everything that's in the graveyard that's below its cost. Pia's Revolution can recycle for card draw and life gain, so it's pretty good that way. It's a blocker. It's, it does a whole bunch of things in this deck and is quite hated on every now and then. People will be, torn whether you see these long pauses on their turns when you drop the familiar, and then you see the removal. It's like, you thought about it. You had to think about it. So, I mean, it offers decision on their part. And then the final card that offers, or one of the cards that offers the massive decisions on our opponent's part to make their game ever so more complicated is Pia's Revolution. So for 2 and a red, it's an enchantment. Whenever a non-token artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to your hand unless target opponent has Pia's Revolution, deal 3 damage to him or her. That can be directed to planeswalkers as well, so it's very nice in that regards too. I think there's one game in the gameplay video where I actually did take out a planeswalker that way, because Buddy didn't really understand or didn't think of the redirect part of that. So it has some value there. I mean, it really seems to confuse a few people on how they want to play around it. It makes the game very difficult for them. So maybe you get them a little off their game because they're not exactly sure how to play around it. Sometimes they just kind of play as if they were playing normally. I mean, it's hard to say. It makes them have interesting decisions, interesting plays, and interesting ways about how they start going about things from that point forward. Anyways, next up is Ghirapur Aether Grid, our basic main control card that's going to keep the field clear. And keep... This thing is great against aggro. to a point. So for 2 and a red, it's an enchantment. Tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Ghirapur Aether Grid deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So definitely good at keeping the board clear. Token decks hate them. Did I just say that? Anyway. So basically, constantly keeps the field clear or gets rid of the minor threats. You can compile damage in some regards. Say, deal with a planeswalker. You can combine it with combustion, for example. Combine it with ballista to do a nice total damage. Combine it with lightning axe to get something 6 toughness. I've done that against, I think, the Red Gear Hulk as an example. So there are relevant things, and when that runs out, fire it at your opponent, which I did in a game that was not recorded, and did like 20-something life to him over the course of his end step and my turn. My turn counter almost ran out trying to fire that off. But anyways, it does do a lot of work. That was the Hail Mary play, if you want to know the reason why I did like 20 damage to him. I didn't really see it happening. I was just like, well, maybe I can get there. So it can it can get you there. It's definitely a good card to have in conjunction with Pia's Revolution to try and get the massive damage in. And basically any hand that you have with just a crap ton of artifacts but really no endgame to it is still pretty darn good, because you'll draw into your endgame probably with a lot of these cards to replace themselves, so you might be able to get there. So it's interesting how the deck plays. You actually don't want to see too many of your win cons in your hand, because that means you're not drawing artifacts. So it's very important to have a lot of artifacts, especially if you draw a grid. So if you draw a mitt full of artifacts, you want to play it anyway, just because grid will come at some point in time, and all of a sudden you're online. And with the card draw effects, it's definitely getting there. Next up is our board wipe. Incendiary Sabotage for 2 colorless and 2 red, an instant, and as an additional cost Sabotage, sacrifice an artifact. It deals 3 damage to each creature. Now this one wasn't exactly my idea, this particular one. while I was building the deck over the course of the week, I went over to Cover Go Blues channel and saw that he made this deck too. And I was like, well, he was first to the punch. But anyways, I grabbed this idea for him for the board wipe. It definitely does quite a bit of work there to clear aggro. And the situation comes up. Not as much as you would think, oddly enough, because I swear I play all these crazy decks that are bad matchups. You know, start your engines decks, for example. This doesn't work against that. That's a terrible matchup. Anyways, Chandra's Ignition is the next card and also counts as a board wipe. So, for 3 colorless and 2 red as a sorcery, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. This is a 1 copy of for, well, I mean, it's board wipe and if you got the right situation, but you don't really want to draw into it unless you're set up. I mean, it has 4 cards potential in the entire deck that it's actually useful with. Next one would be this one. Mel Work Colossus. For 11 mana as an artifact creature that is a 10/10 and costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control. So yeah, you get this guy down, you Chandra's Ignition, and hopefully that wins you the game, because 10 damage Chandra's Ignitions are awesome. That's what he's in there for, and then hopefully you swing in for 10. If not, this card actually does have some strong synergies with the deck. You can discard them to Lightning Axe, so you can get your sacrifice effects towards your artifacts and get your PS Revolution online to be doing some work at will if you needed to. So there's that, and you can recycle some of your artifacts in that regards. So he's useful in all regards that way. You can discard him to Bomac Courier as well. So that leaves about 4 sources that you can discard him with. Or, you know, if you get him out and he dies, I mean, there's always the traditional method. The other card I wanted to mention, Chandra's Ignition, also good with Walking Ballista. Should it come to late game, Ballista can get a little bit larger. And if it happens to survive, you can do some serious board wipes with that too if it comes up. And for our land base, 17 Mountains, 2 Inventors Fair, and 3 Foundry of the Consoles. I think there's no other special cards in there that we're looking for, but for the land base, that's pretty much as simple as it is. So yeah, the deck's a lot of decisions, and I mean, you can miss on everything that makes the deck go. Like, you could run into no PS Revolutions, no grids, no ignitions, and draw or draw only ignition and only the Colossus, only the sabotage, or you know, just only these cards for that matter, and not get any of your low-end artifacts. I mean, 27 artifacts, and sometimes you only draw like 2. I mean, it happens. The deck is a little bit volatile. That is one thing to point out. But anyways, yeah, that's the deck tech, and there was a consideration I had last minute thought was adding green to the deck for fogs to really hold back those creature decks, because your card draw is here, obviously. So there's not too much trouble in that regards, but sitting behind fogs is also an option. And green has a few other tricks behind it, obviously. Maybe you might want to throw in Rex Sages or something like that, and, you know, work a balance that way. And I'd say it's a pretty good complementary color to try and keep this alive. But yeah, that would probably do it. That would probably make it a more rounded out, robust version. Depends on how you want to look at it. But that's a suggestion out there for you guys if you want to look into that. And maybe we'll look at that down the road. We'll see. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the deck tech, and tell me if you have any suggestions for it. I'll throw a discussion. We can have a discussion in the comments about what works, what doesn't. I've done a lot of work with it, so I can tell you what was really failing in case that idea came up, and tell you just what the cards were doing if they failed. And I'll tell you if I haven't considered them, and I'll definitely try them out. And All right, I'll see you later, and check out the gameplay. All right, bye-bye.